Okay, so in front of us is an XP Deus metal detector remote that unfortunately won't power on. If we try to press the power button, we can see nothing happens. There's nothing on the screen. And if we plug it in using a micro USB cable and we press the power button, again, nothing happens. So let's go ahead and take it apart and look at it from an overhead view so we can figure out exactly what's gone wrong. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to verify that this thing actually gets some power. So given that it has a battery, we want to be checking the battery voltage. 3.718 volts, which is more or less what we should see. Now let's go ahead and verify that it does actually get 5 volts when we plug it in. 5.1 volts, which is what we should get. What we can do for a device like this is that we can actually try to make it power on without using the menu or the buttons at the front. So what we can do is we can take our multimeter and put it in diode mode. We can put one probe on ground, and then we can put our other probe on the base of this transistor. And just to confirm, this thing is off, as you can see. There we go. And you notice that when we do that, the thing turns on. And in fact, if we do it again, we'll go from that speaker icon to the menu, which tells us that this microcontroller works without issue. And in fact, the actual electronics themselves are all good. So our real problem, as you can imagine, is the fact that we likely have a damaged front panel, or maybe I should say remote or buttons, over here. So if you don't know, the way these buttons work is that they essentially just short a few pins. So basically, if we press a button, you'll notice that our diode reading goes from open line to 0 volts. And this is how these buttons typically work. What they do is they short a few pins together so that the microcontroller on the actual board itself knows that the button has been pressed. So again, when we press it down, it goes to 0 volts. When we let go, it goes to open line. However, as you can imagine, we have a problem with one of the buttons, in particular, the power button. So the power button is a little unique relative to all the other buttons in that it doesn't short to ground, but rather it raises the pin to about 3.7 volts. So the power button pin is this one over here on the very left, and this pin here is 3.7 volts from the battery. If we check our button, you'll see that we have a very low 0.02 volts. But if we press the button, this drops to 0 volts. So it's basically constantly shorting these pins. So basically what's happening to our remote control is that when we plug it in, and I'll show you this will be a bit difficult, and we turn it over, we can see it's powered on. But then it powers itself off. Because of how low the connection is, basically what's happening is that the board thinks that you're pressing the power button when you first insert the cable, but then it thinks that you're holding the power button. And so it turns itself off, and the next time you press the power button, nothing else happens. Anyways, as you can imagine, the fix for this is very, very basic. We need to take off this front cover and replace the button, or either get it unstuck as it seems to be, well, stuck. Anyways, so as you can see, we have the front portion taken off. So if we check those two pins again for resistance, or just, in this case we're going to use resistance mode, we still have a short, a 12.6 ohm short. So what's the reason that there's a short? I'm not too sure, but there's also a piece of debris here. So let me go ahead and wipe that off. Checking those two pins again for short. Nothing. In fact, if we go to diode mode, open line. If you're wondering, there's a small metal piece bridging the pins, and that small metal piece was actually from the underside of this button. It has these metal contacts on the bottom, and when you press them, they bridge the two pins together. But unfortunately, I can tell that a small portion of this button broke off, and when it did, it bridged those two pins and caused the metal detector remote to think that the power button was being constantly pressed. At this point, we could go ahead and put this thing back together, but I'll be upfront and say that I don't think this is a good idea. Anyways, as you can see, portions of the metal contact on the underside of the power button have already fallen off. And I have a feeling that if we put it back together, another part will just fall off later and then cause the owner even more grief. Okay, as you saw, I cleaned the contact under the power button. If we now press and hold the power button, it actually turns on. And if we go through all the other buttons, like let's say this one, that works. This one works. The minus button works. The plus button works, and finally this crosshair thing at the bottom. Yep, that works as well. Okay, so as you can see, the metal detector remote works. I should note that a proper repair involves replacing the entire front of the remote itself, but this is, unfortunately the part is out of stock here in the States, and so the owner is going to hold on to it until it becomes in stock, and he'll just replace it himself. Otherwise, if you have an electronic that you want to send in for repair, I have a website, www.techtemtor.com. I look at more than just graphics cards, and I'm happy to look at basically anything, provided, of course, it is feasible to send in for repair. And like always, I hope you got something from the video, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.